Live from the studio at the Northwest Florida School of Biblical Studies, this is Have a Bible Question, where you are part of the program. Now, let's go to the Bible for answers to your Bible questions.
Sharon Caniff has a question, so we're going to have to go here and go back. I got to find it. I thought it was a good question. What is or how do you define the soul? And when you die, what happens to your soul until you are called on the last day? I got the second part of that question. I'm ready to go. You want the first part?
Well,
I disappointed you. You wanted the second part.
No, both of them are connected together.
I think they are. I think they are.
I always start in Genesis 35:18. I don't know why. That's just the one that my brain goes to every time. But in Genesis 35:18, Rebecca is dying. Rachel is dying. And it says in verse 18, and so it was as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, and his father called him Benjamin. And the only reason I go there is because that's the first thing you need to understand about defining a soul, is that it is separate from...
Where were you reading?
35:18 of Genesis. The soul is something separate from our bodies. All right? We are creatures. We are a creation that's been made of multiple components.
That goes back to earlier, what Jeff was saying, right? And Peter?
About?
The earthly tabernacle?
Yes,
he was getting ready to put it off?
That's a great point. And that's what I'm trying to say is the first thing as far as defining the soul is to understand it is part of you. It is you. And so it's the part of us that lives on. And the way I like to explain a lot of time is we don't have an end because the soul lives forever. We have a beginning. We come into this earth through God's means, procreation, but then we live forever because of the soul. So that's the first point to answer the definition of a soul. You have something, Jeff?
Well, 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 1 and 2, and I think you were referring to this, or you were thinking of this last week when we were talking something about.
Bring it on.
For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, or talking about death, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Now, specifically, for in this we groan, in other words, this body, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven. Okay, the spiritual body he's talking about. If so be that being clothed we shall not be found naked, for that we are in this tabernacle do groan, being burdened, not for that we would be unclothed, but clothed upon, that mortality might be swallowed up in life. And I know he's talking about the glorified body there.
I would actually argue the soul comes at conception.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm
just saying the soul will continue after this body is dissolved.
There you go.
That's the point I'm making.
The soul will continue after this body is gone. So we talked about this before on Good News Today. This was a question that came through that we recorded. And we also brought out the fact that the words soul and spirit are often interchangeable, that they're used in different ways. But there is a distinction. There is a distinction between the soul and the spirit, because sometimes you see that, for example, in Hebrews chapter 7, or I think it is, where it talks about the sword dividing the soul, splitting
4:12,
4:12, talking about how the soul is sharper than any two-edged sword, which is capable of dividing asunder. What does it say? The soul and spirit, right? So there you see the two words together, and then there's other verses too that talk about, I believe it's in one of the Thessalonian letters, it talks about soul and spirit. So there is a subtle difference.
Right.
And a lot of the ways that I like to explain it is the soul is the component that we have, as you just said, is going to live on forever. The spirit is the life force of that soul. God gives us that spirit.
Okay.
Can I give you an interesting verse there?
Yeah, do it.
The spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching all the inward parts of the belly. Proverbs 20. Verse 27.
How about that?
Yeah.
See, that's awesome.
That the idea of that, and what people got to understand is there's parts of us that are not physical.
Yes.
When we think about like the fruit of the Spirit, that's why people get so confused. The joy, the love, the peace, the long suffering. the who makes Troy what he is. It's more your thoughts, your heart. You know, I remember this great Christian lady. She was so smart in the Bible, but she would frustrate me because you're like, I don't understand heart and mind, because we're talking about the heart of man, but isn't that just the mind? And I was like, well, even the mind isn't physical. That's the brain. You know, when we talk about,
Yeah, that's right.
so we're talking about something that's not physical, able to touch. And so sometimes, like in Proverbs 20:27, when he says the spirit is what shows who you really are. The belly, there's not a reference physically. That's a Hebrew poetry to try in the inward parts of man.
Right. I always look at it this way. The heart of man would be his volition. The mind of man would be his intellect. You have that which you know and that which drives you.
Yes.
Yeah.
You look at
And
it that way,
these are all things that are not physical. So when we
right.
think of the soul of the man, it's something deeper. It's something
Unseen.
that obviously, you know, you demonstrate from Genesis chapter 35. Now let's go to the second part of this real quick, because we're going to run out of time tonight for all of this. But Genesis chapter 35, Luke 16 tells us the idea. Where does the soul go? It goes to the Hadean realm, which is not hell. I know King James would say that it says goes to hell, but the Hadean realm is a place that is divided by a great gulf, with one part being the place of paradise, or Abraham's bosom, Luke 16, and the other part being the place of torment. It's pretty much a waiting room. It's an awaiting place for when the judgment day comes. And where you go is determined by what you do here. So is there a foreshadowing of what the judgment will be? Certainly. But that's where the soul goes when it dies. And it's interesting because it talks about the idea of, y'all help me with the verse, guys, that he will not suffer him to stay.
Acts chapter 2.
Yeah.
Thank you. See, y'all are so smart. You answered that very condescending, like I should have known, Troy.
See, I had to get back for the other when you were condescending to me. So
that's what it was. Okay. Maybe we need to have dinner together. Our rapport tonight seems to go. Maybe we need to do that every Tuesday night. All right.
a little more relaxed.
Anyway, does that answer the question thoroughly, or are we?
I
missing
do want to
something?
add just one more thing, and that is the actual word that's used is the word suke, and sometimes there's two words that are used, sometimes interchangeably for those. There's suke, which means a breath or life, and then there's pneuma, which is where we get our word like pneumatic, and that means kind of like wind or spirit. And so those are words also that are very important. And here it says, interesting, you were bringing that up a minute ago about the mind and the heart. Mm-hmm. It says, for suke, the seat of the feelings, desires, affections, aversions, our heart and our soul.
Oh,
so
wow.
I found that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That is cool. I like that.